Hello, I'm with Dr. Block and Derek, and Dr. Block is going to be talking about thyroid function tests. Now, Doc, I know you do a lot, treat a lot of patients with low thyroid function, and you have some tests that you usually run. And what is your philosophy where thyroid, low thyroid function is concerned?
Well, the most common thyroid we have, and I'm glad that you're here today so we can talk about you and your thyroid issues, is due to low thyroid. And we call this hypothyroid, and you've done a lot of reading on it. When it gets really bad, they use the term myxedema. The most common cause of this is probably Hashimoto's disease. 75% of all low thyroid in this country is due to Hashimoto's disease. And when I first met you, I looked at your hand, and we saw that your little finger was little. And I had you blow through this machine that measured parts per million of hydrogen, and at that time you were slightly elevated, indicating that you could have a gluten intolerance. And gluten intolerance is what caused most Hashimoto's disease. Not commonly thought of by most physicians, but Hashimoto's disease is caused by gluten coming into the systemic circulation and the body making an antibody to it. And then we check for this antibody. Remember what it was called? TPO, thyroid peroxidase, and yours was elevated. So not only did you have elevation of your hydrogen test indicating that you had a gluten problem, but your TPO was elevated. Subsequently, we found out that your TSH was also low, thyroid stimulating hormone. And the TSH is what most doctors use to make a diagnosis of low thyroid, normal thyroid, which we call euthyroid, or hyperthyroid. The range of TSH is anywhere as low as 0.3 to 5.5. This is what most doctors use. However, the ideal range is between 0.30 and 1.75. Now, you would not be diagnosed as having low thyroid by most doctors, but your TSH was high enough. Again, the higher the TSH, the lower thyroid is working, was high enough that I thought that you had low thyroid. Not only was it a laboratory test, but you also had problems which is typical of folks that have low thyroid: fatigue, weight gain, some constipation, and we started you on bioidentical thyroid, which we'll talk about later. Now, this is the most common cause of low thyroid, but early on, when folks start having this Hashimoto's, the antibody comes out and starts destroying the thyroid. It can cause high thyroid. It can cause an elevation of thyroid, and commonly it's misdiagnosed as Graves' disease. Graves' disease is what most doctors know about, what most patients read when there's an overactive thyroid. And this is characterized by a goiter, which you do not have, large bulging eyes, which we call exophthalmos, which you did not have, and a very rare thing, which I've only seen twice in my life, but everybody talks about, this thing on the shin called pretibial myxedema. And there is a special test that we get in some patients, but I didn't get it on you because I didn't think you had this. It's called a TSI, thyroid stimulating immunoglobulins. Both Hashimoto's and Graves' disease, there's an abnormal antibody, but this is TSI in Graves' disease and TPO in Hashimoto's. So once we made the diagnosis, you cleaned up your act. You took gluten out of your diet.
Yes.
You felt much better.
Felt much better. Had more energy.
And then, in addition to that, we placed you on bioidentical thyroid. Now, a lot of doctors use the synthetic thyroid called T4. Or we used to use another synthetic thyroid called T3, Cytomel. Actually, T4 and T3 are bioidentical, but God wants us to have a combination of T3 and T4 at the same time. That's why when He made your thyroid, it secretes T4 and T3 in a ratio of 14 1. But pig's thyroid, porcine thyroid, has a ratio of 4 to 1, and for the previous 120 years, we were giving pig thyroid to folks with a ratio of 4 to 1. A whole company called Armour, that's noted for the slaughterhouse pigs, made thyroid, and this was called Armour Thyroid. And they still make it, although the company went bankrupt. They had to re-dye and retool, and it's not quite the same it used to be. But I believe that T3, T4, and is a good combination. Now, compounding pharmacists will put this together in any ratio that the doctor wants. But most of us who've been doing this for a while still use the old-fashioned 4 to 1 ratio. To give T4, like most doctors, is maybe helpful for some patients because the T4, which is a pro-hormone, is broken down by an enzyme, iodothyronase, to T3, and it is the T3 that does 95% of the work. But 90% of people can do it to some degree, maybe 30% to 100% of breaking down. But some folks can't break down their T4 to T3 at all, and then some folks break down their T4 to something called reverse T3, where the thyroid iodine is here instead of there. It looks for all the world like T3, except molecularly it doesn't fit in the receptor. And some doctors even measure for that. I haven't in a long time. Years ago I did, but after 20 years of measuring for it, I didn't find it helpful. In fact, I don't find it helpful to even measure the T4. To me, it is the TSH, a TPO, and maybe the TSI that's worth measuring. But then, it's not a laboratory test that I treat. I treat you, Derek. I treat the patient. And if the proof of the pudding is the eating, and I saw you a month later and you felt much better, yes, I know I did the right thing. And incidentally, we are going to repeat, maybe even today, another TSH to see if it's got into physiologic range as far as I'm concerned, which is 0.3 to 1.75. Taking your thyroid, we had this talk. It should be taken on an empty stomach. Some things, like if you take it with antacids, it completely destroys the absorption. Even taking with most drugs decreases its efficiency. Taking it with food doesn't work, and there was a study from Italy that coffee causes the inability of the body to absorb all the thyroid. So I tell my folks, rather than take it in the morning and waiting 2 hours before eating, take it before you go to bed at night unless you snack. Now, you don't snack anymore,
No.
but some people do snack. They have to have a little bite before they eat. And then I tell them to put it in their bathroom sink. And when they get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, you told me you did that once or twice, then they take it. And if they don't get up per chance, they find it first thing in the morning when they get up, and then they take the thyroid.
That doesn't make them not sleep, right?
We used to think that thyroid, I've had patients that tell me that taking their thyroid in the morning is like taking a cup of coffee, but it's more in the mind than in the physiology. There was a study not too long in the New England Journal of Medicine that showed that thyroid is absorbed better, not just on an empty stomach, but on a resting empty GI tract that occurs during the night. And during the day, every 3 or 4 hours, you're putting something into your gut. So that's why I want you to take yours at night. When are you taking your thyroid?
Taking it at night.
Okay. And listen to what I said.
Yes, sir.
And you do feel better.
Feeling better.
Derek, thank you so much for coming and letting us put it on video.
Thank you so much, Dr. Block, and thank you for giving us the time during your lunch break. All right,
I'll
cheers.
get to that.